Okay, back here with another video previewing fall practices, previewing the defensive backs. We're going to get to the safeties and the cornerbacks in this one. We're going to name the best player of the group, who we think is the best, as well as a breakout player to watch, and then also the top true freshman of this group. Let's get into this, David, with the best player of the group. There's a lot of different routes you could go because, like I said, we're doing corners and safety. So, who do you think the best defensive back is heading to fall practices into the season here?
Yeah, I'll go with the easy answer and just say Bubba Bolden. There's certainly things he needs to clean up from last season. Needs to raise the consistency level with his coverage and also tackling in space. But on the flip side, you saw the high playmaking ability, the ability to significantly impact games. And, that means a lot, in my opinion, in football. And, so essentially, if Bubba can sustain that playmaking ability and raise his floor, which I think is a fair expectation of Bubba. Last year was his first year of really playing any significant snaps at the college level. So now that he's in year 2 as a starter, I think we'll see a more consistent player. He's on various preseason All-American lists. I'll just go with Bubba Bolden.
I think he's the best player, and I would not be surprised if he would sustain his play. We saw that first half of the season essentially playing at a high level week after
Yeah.
week, and then he was ACC Defensive Back Player of the Week, I think twice during that span, and making a number of plays. And I think that it's not out of the question that he can sustain that for a whole season. I also the reason why I think he's the best player or why he can sustain that play for a whole year is because I trust him as a player, as a person. You hear him talk; it's been this
Yeah.
way since we've
Stud.
gotten to know him. He just gets it. He's a guy
Yeah.
that strikes me as wants to be good, wants to be better, is a leader, has confidence, has played at a high level in high school, playing at USC, another highly regarded program. So I think he's going to have a good year, a big year, and I think it's important for him to have a big year because the defense, like you said, when we talked about linebackers, there's a lot of question marks there. So if you have a safety that's picking up there, I think that'll certainly help. I'm curious about cornerbacks, though. Um,
Yeah.
One of the things that strikes me with the cornerback position is these guys that they have all can kind of match up against different receivers differently in
Yeah.
terms of what the wide receivers bring into the line of scrimmage to the offense. I think you can match up differently, and I kind of like that. I think you've got guys like DJ Ivy with his length. You've got Tyrique Stevenson with a little bit more physicality, a little bit more size, and then you got Corey Couch, aggressive but a little bit on the smaller side. But maybe you can guard those smaller guys a little bit better. Al Blades Jr. with experience, kind of more in that all around cornerback because he doesn't necessarily have the length or the physical, but he just kind of has an all around package. And then maybe some of the young guys step up too. So I think it's interesting to see this group as a whole. But I more interceptions. I think they got to get their hands on
Yeah.
on bat down passes a little bit more. We've seen them do it at times with DJ and Al, to Corey too. But I think interceptions, you'd like to see a little bit more playmaking ability with the ball in the air, really provide a constant threat in the passing game.
Who would you, so let's say base defense, right? So 2 corners. Who do you project as the starting 2 right now?
I th- I think maybe Tyreek and DJ. But I know, but it's tough because Corey's playing time went up quite a bit last year towards the second half of the year, and he was their guy. So it's very interesting to me, and maybe it will be a matchup thing. Maybe if they have bigger receivers, they'll go with those two, and if there's a
Right.
smaller guy, maybe they'll go with Corey and Tyreek. Maybe you're looking at that, but I'm not quite sure, honestly. And I don't, and really, I don't know what the coaches are going to do. But also, if I were in their shoes, I'm not sure what I would do either, because just because you have a smaller corner in Corey doesn't mean he can't guard taller guys a little
Right.
bit better than the guy with size. So I like Corey's ability. I think he's got a chance to be good. Year 3, I think that's a common theme whenever we're talking about going into any of these position groups is you're talking about guys going into year 3, year 4, year 5, a lot of
Right.
experience. And the things you've learned when you cover college football is guys do get better with experience, and what you thought of them in year 1 or year 2 Well, by the time year 3 and 4 come up, they're just a different player. They make different impacts. They're in the strength and conditioning program. They understand what it takes. So I think a guy like Takori could be wouldn't be surprising to see him better than he's been the first couple of years.
I probably lean towards just because the college game with the hashes, it's generally speaking boundary and field, right? So to me, Tyrique probably the boundary, and I would view Takori as their best field corner. So just generally speaking, base defense, that's how I would view it. But I think you're right. It'll probably boil down to matchups, and quite frankly, just rotations. They might just rotate them as starters week to week to week and have them play similar snaps, however the game goes from that point. But I I do think Tyrique Stevenson is going to be a key addition to this group. I think he's those other three, DJ, Al, and Takori are solid, but I think Tyrique has the chance to be the number one corner, and I think that's something that's kind of been missing the last couple of years.
And I think he's ready to take on that. A couple years at Georgia playing against high level opponents. And I know he has high goals. I mean, we heard him. I mean, he has high goals for himself, and I think that's a good thing. And I think it's good. We've seen this at other position groups. I think at wide receiver a couple years ago with KJ Osborne steps in as a veteran guy, and it's kind of interesting to say that because Tyrique this is year 3 for him, whereas DJ and Al have a little bit more experience, but just a guy that can kind of step in and get right to the top of the depth chart in terms of either experience and ability as well. And I think that's going to be important just to have that extra guy that can really be that top guy. And I think he's also a guy that those guys look at to in terms of a confident player, a guy that does
Yeah.
do some things that they're not able to with their abilities. He just has that unique skill set. And I think the thing that you're seeing with Tyrique too, you're hearing him work out and quite a bit. I think he's got a really big emphasis. I think he's got high goals for himself, like I said.
Confidence and poise is one thing I do want to see both Al and DJ take a next step with this year. I think their ability is better than what we've seen, but I think confidence and poise can improve. And if it does, I think we'll see more consistent play out of those two guys in particular.
And with that, I really think Al's got a chance to be a really solid player with those two attributes you just talked about, because everyone we've talked to, just his personality,
Yeah.
from a lot of his teammates are really excited about a guy like Al, and I think when Al's playing well and doing a good job, I think that helps the whole defense. So I wouldn't be surprised at all to see Al have a good season and really exude that confidence and that personality that a defense needs. And I think Al's got a chance to have a good season. I think at times we've seen it, and maybe in I don't want to say short stints with a sequence of games, but then something might happen in another game. It doesn't go quite as well as he would like. So I think he's got a chance to put together a solid season. Again, you're talking about a guy that's played a lot on the last couple of years and looking to turn the corner. I think it's good that all these guys have experience and they kind of bring something different to the table.
Do you see any other corners cracking the rotation? Because I don't. You got Marcus Clark, Isaiah Dunson, Malik Curtis. I think they're probably a year away, if we're being honest.
Yeah, I don't think they're ready. And I think with Takori Couch as a young player, you thought he could get an opportunity, could be ready if he got an opportunity. I don't feel the same with this group. I know Marcus Clark has gotten some opportunities. They like his ball skills and things like that, but I don't think he brings enough to the table quite yet to really crack that. And even if he gets in there, how often would he be in there? I think if you've got 4 healthy guys, those are clearly the 4 you'll go with. Breakout defensive back. Let's get to it. I'm curious who you're going to say with this, because once again, you can go different routes with it.
Yeah, I would probably go Tyrique. I think, he primarily played the slot at Georgia, big nickel role. I think he's out to prove that he can play on the outside on an island at Miami. And I think he's going to be pretty good in that role. So I'll go Tyrique. I think he can be, I don't know, first team all ACC, but I think he can be a second or third team all ACC type player for them this year.
That's certainly a good one because, like you said, he's played, but I think taking that jump is what he's looking to do. As a breakout player, again, I think James Williams has a chance. If he gets on the field, I trust his abilities. I trust what he can bring to the team. I think I know that he wasn't there in the spring, but I think he's a guy that can show what he's got. I think he's willing to learn, willing to take it all in. When I'm looking at maybe a breakout guy, I think he's a guy. Although once again, I understand the Tyrique pick because what he's done at Georgia the first couple of years, he's got a chance to really break out and kind of emerge on an all conference level and not just be one of those guys you remember as a highly regarded recruit. So I like that. But I think, and with that, I think James is top freshman. I'm very interested to see how he plays, how he fits in. And I think is another guy that we'll see how he does week one. I think he's a guy that could do some things on special teams before he gets in that base defense. So, but I'm very curious to see how his whole season progresses.
Where we at on Gervin Hall? Because he took a step back last year, I think it's fair to say, but in 2019, he was second on the team in tackles, I think. You know, can we at least get, no matter what you think of him as a player, would it's important for him to at least get back to that 2019 level. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, I think he can be solid. I don't see the big potential like you see with the Bubba Bolden. I don't feel like we've seen something out of Gervin, but I know that again, years of experience adding up. Last year wasn't the year that he would have liked. Um, I think he could be solid. I think that's what they're looking for. I think he's the guy that would start at safety alongside Bubba at this point. I know they can move Amari Carter back to a safety spot. They like they like some of the things he did at striker. And Coach Diaz has mentioned, we'll see how the depth looks at safety, whether we're going to keep him at striker or back at safety. So that'll be interesting. But I think I could see. I think it'll be Gervin at safety alongside Bubba. I think that's who they'll go with again. But if he's not playing well, they got a guy like James that can really show himself in opportunities and definitely certainly good enough to be on the field if they want to go that route.
How much of a hit? I mean, obviously, I think Miami made the right call dismissing him, but just from a playing standpoint, talent standpoint, ability standpoint, how much of a hit is it that Avante Williams is not going to be a part of this secondary? Because in my opinion, I think Bubba Bolden and him had a chance to be one of the best pairings in the country, quite frankly. Do you think it was a big blow just from a playing standpoint?
Yeah, I do. And I think some people might disregard it a little bit because they haven't seen Avante on the field in games, but I think he's going to be that starter. I
Yeah.
remember hearing Gervin Hall,
Yeah.
the way that teammates talk about guys, particularly if they're competing against him for playing time, Gervin's, essentially, I don't remember exact term, but essentially he was kind of amazed by some of the things Avante could do. So I think it was going to be Avante and Bubba. And I think what Avante was bringing to the table was going to be a little bit more than what they have at this current time. And I think, I think he was going to make an impact. I think he was going to be a starter throughout the season. His hard hitting ability, stuff we saw in the past, be able to defend the pass. But certainly they made the right move there. So they made their decision, and we'll see how these other guys react. Touched on Amari. He's a guy that can make that move back because
Yeah.
of this. But I also think James Williams, we haven't seen him enough at UM yet. I think once practices get going, he's going to be a guy that makes plays. They're going to be impressed by him. I remember seeing him in high school, but what he did last year on film, seeing him, what he did there, I thought he took even a jump up from already being an impressive prospect. So I think he's going to bring something to the table at UM. And once again, even if he's not in that rotation, I think he's a guy to watch for throughout the year, but certainly a bright future, regardless of how his playing time goes. I think he's certainly a guy that UM fans are certainly be excited about.
Yeah, I just hope for James that they at least have a sub package that includes him on third down. I think that's a down where you want kind of as many defensive backs, quite frankly, as many safeties on the field as possible. And I think that's an opportunity to at least get his feet wet, get him on the field. So hopefully game one, you get that talent on the field in a sub package role in some way. What about the other safeties, right? Because you've touched on James, the other young safeties, but there is Cam Kitchens, who's a freshman. There's Brian Balaam, who got some playing time last year when Miami was in a pinch. Keyshawn Washington, I think, took a nice step forward, from what I thought he could be. I think he flashed a little bit in the spring. How do you view these young guys? Do any of them have a chance to crack the playing rotation?
I think if we're talking about that group, I think maybe Cam Kitchens is a guy to keep an eye on as just that steady, just a guy that
Yeah.
gets it for being a young player. I think he's the one to watch for. Um, I wonder if he's going to, he's got to make enough plays to be out there, not just be a steady guy, right? So he's got
Sure.
to be a guy that can make plays. But we saw that in the spring game with that pick. So that's good that he, came down with it. I like guys that come from top programs, that are used to playing at high levels out of high school. So I think he's a guy. And I think if we're talking about the future at this point with a guy like Cam and maybe a guy like James, certainly
Yeah.
both of them bring something different to the table. But Cam's, they've got other guys that can go with. So you mentioned the other guys, Brian Balaam, played a lot towards the end, or we saw more playing time as a young guy last year a little bit. So, Keyshawn Washington's been in the program. You touched on him, what we saw from the spring. So I wouldn't say that they excite me as automatic starters when they're playing
Right.
time. When it comes up, they still got a lot to prove, and I think it comes with opportunities, like you said, when they get on the field, but also special teams. I think defensive backs, linebackers, those are the top two positions that I always look for on special teams. Young players that got to make plays there. There's opportunities, and you got to go make plays. And I think all these guys have chances to make plays if they're out there.
Yeah, I'm intrigued if Brian Balaam can make a push. We'll see. I don't know yet what to make of him, honestly. But I do know that the coaching staff and even, Bubba Bolden spoken highly of him for what he was thrown into the fire last year against Clemson, and how he, kind of kept his head above water, so to speak. So I think he's a guy to see, how does he take the next step this fall camp.
Yeah, and just kind of real quick before we wrap this up, you touched on Isaiah Dunson. I am intrigued by him because of his length. I'm curious to see how he develops as a player. Again, I don't think he's going to be one of those top. I think those top four guys are separating that
Right.
corner. But I am intrigued by Isaiah. I touched on Marcus Clark, his ball skills, but I'm curious to see if Isaiah can continue to develop physically, and then also
Right.
just kind of make more adjustments to the college game, because I think if he continues to improve, I think he's a guy to look forward to in the future, because he's got that length that you're looking for at the corner spot, particularly They like that size in the back four there, 4 or 5. So we did not touch on strikers. Just real quick about
Yeah.
strikers, Gilbert Frierson, we've not got a chance to talk about him. I think he's certainly a key to this team. Touched on Amari making the move back and forth. But Gilbert, let's talk about Gilbert.
Yeah. I mean, he took a big step forward, I think, last year. That being said, I still think there's areas for him to clean up, particularly with tackling angles and all that stuff. But I think the thing that he constantly gets praise about from the coaching staff is how smart he is on the field. His football intelligence is highly regarded on the team, and that matters. So I think he's a guy that if he does take the next step, that's definitely a good thing. I'm intrigued. I'm not reporting this. I'm not saying this at all. I'm intrigued if Gilbert is going to get a look at weak side linebacker. You give Keontre Smith a look there. I'd be curious to see what Gilbert can do in that role, and that would allow Amari Carter to kind of be the full-time striker. So that's kind of I Gilbert needs to be on the field no matter what. I'm just curious what spot they put him at, and if he is a smart guy, he should be able to figure it out at weak side too, and he's longer to get off blocks than Keontre would be.
Yeah, definitely. Plenty of things to watch for with the defensive backs during fall camp. No doubt about it. Plenty of guys to look for.